Welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where guests share their powerful, personal stories of transformation through human design. I'm Kathy Bashanko, an intuitive human design mentor and guide to radical self-trust. Join us as we explore how your human design experiment can truly change your life. Good morning. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and my guest today is Eden Carpenter. Eden's a 6'2" emotional manifesting generator, left angle cross of duality, and she, like me, is a triple split. So I'm sure we'll dive into that. And I'm really excited to talk to Eden today because we met at the Human Design Conference, and it was just so cool to listen to all of this wisdom and depth come out of this young, beautiful face. And I just, I don't mean to in any way imply that you're a baby or anything, but to me, you're a baby, you're still in your 20s, right? And the depth that you have already gained on your journey has been beautiful. And so I want to tell you a little bit about, before I say hello, but hi, for those who can see Eden's smiling face there. Eden Carpenter blends human design, gene keys, and rapid resolution therapy into gamified and fantasy-inspired experiences. Eden discovered human design at 20 years old as a broke college student and military wife. 7 years later, Eden brings a delightful and innovative twist to shadow work, unmasking, and personal development to tens of thousands of humans across the globe. Her profound wisdom, wrapped in playful energy, is nothing short of magical, and her work is the breath of fresh air that the self-development space has been craving. So welcome, Eden. I'm super happy to have you here on Real Human Design Stories, and I'd love if you just say hello and dive right into this really incredible story you have.
Hi, Kathy. I am so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. And where it feels most important to start is how I found human design. It's a fun story where it was popping up everywhere on social media when I was in college. I was following everyone online talking about manifestation and psychology and the Enneagrams and personal development of all kinds. And I ran my human design chart when somebody had posted about it. And I was instantly overwhelmed. And I said, no, thank you. I said, that's a lot of shapes. That's a lot of colors. That's a lot of numbers. No, that's too complicated. So I put it aside and went back to my scrolling and went back to my daily life. But then human design just kept popping up over and over and over and over again. And so it was something that I felt like I couldn't get away from. And there was actually almost a divine intervention moment where I was sitting in a psychology lecture with a professor who never used slides. He was a sit there, lecture at you, talk at you, have a conversation kind of person. And he decided to make a slide deck for this one presentation. I remember him saying, I don't know why I made a slide deck today. I don't typically make visual aids, but here we are. And there was this weird graphic error where, when the text bubbles, they just get smaller, they get wider, and the formatting is off. And the words are all over the place, and the word human and design were next to each other in the middle of the slide. And I felt like my hearing kind of went numb. I couldn't see for a second. I'm like, okay, this is meant for me, because I've been saying no to this system for several days now, and this is very much a sign. So I went home, pull up Google on one side, pull up my chart on the other, and I start with all the questions. What's a manifesting generator? What are the white shapes in human design chart? What are the colored shapes in the human design chart? What are these numbers? What are these symbols? And I had never felt so called out at a soul level, specifically with the undefined G center. I remember reading this blog post that was saying, in its shadow, you are constantly searching for a sense of identity, a sense of direction, a sense of self, a way to figure out who you need to be in order to be loved. And you tend to really appreciate psychology and systems where you can categorize and organize people. And I didn't realize that all of my behavior up until that point had really been run with this undercurrent of searching for a sense of self and identity. So I got obsessed, dove all the way into it, really played with it for a couple of years for myself and in my relationships. And then I got the little manifesting generator urge to just explore it a little bit deeper and explore other chart variations other than just my own and my husband's. And so I put out on my little Instagram account with my couple hundred followers where I'd been sharing things about spirituality in college and productivity and just things that I was doing. And no one had really engaged or responded to anything or opted into any of the free little downloads that I'd made. And so I put out this call for free human design chart readings. And I felt like it was creepy that I'm like, no one's going to send me their birth information and email address. This is like a scam to steal someone's identity. But I had over 160 people respond in a couple of days. And so I did almost 200 of these free human design chart readings. And then people said, wow, I've never heard it explained like this before. Do you offer readings? Do you offer sessions? Do you offer coaching? Can we work on this together? And so I started getting a couple of paying clients. They started asking for courses. I started creating courses. Then I was in nursing school with this fun little side hustle business that's thriving online. And I got to a point where the pandemic hit. I'm finishing nursing school online, and I have all of this time and space to pour into my business. And people have been asking for me to teach the whole system, like my perspective on the whole system and how I was using it and how I was working with it. And so I did. I put out this certification program, and it was a 6-figure launch, which completely blew my mind. I was hoping for like 3 or 4 people to join. We had like 30 something people join, and it was an amazing program that led to my business growing so fast that when I started my new job as a nurse, I couldn't manage both. I found that cap of manifesting generators don't actually have unlimited energy. There is a limit. And that is being a full-time nurse while also running a full-time business in the way that I was doing it and renovating a new house at the same time. So it was a very chaotic time. I was pulled in all of the directions, and I hit that emotional wave of, I can't go into my job tomorrow. Like, this isn't just an I have to leave nursing at some point. I need to take a couple of days off. It really hit me of I have to quit my job tomorrow. And I did. And that was 4 years ago. And I lasted 6 weeks as a registered nurse, 6 weeks of using my bachelor's degree. But I've spent the last 4 years all online, full time, running this business, creating jobs, creating programs, creating courses, running masterminds, collaborating with different people. And it's gone through many different variations and phases, very manifesting generator of me. And I still have no idea where it's going next, what exactly it's going to turn into in the next couple of years. But I've really just been responding every step of the way and allowing it to flow. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Wow, that's really quite a whirlwind. So, okay, so my questions like processed about 42 of them there. And it's funny because I was like, okay, that ajna is just churning them out, right? But my first thing, actually, the questions are the crown, the head center, right? But okay, my first thing I thought was, I already lost it. So, but so you were talking about that you found it 7 years ago, right? Is that what you said? So 7 years ago, the landscape was completely different for human design, right? And I'm imagining Googling it, the number of resources, because that's about, I found it like 8 years ago. And I remember Googling it. You had to look, right? You had
Yeah.
to really look for stuff. And when you found stuff, most of that stuff was either source material or very specific, well-versed educators.
Yeah.
So I will say what you did, I think worked a lot better than I warn people if that's the approach they're going to take now, that just Googling, what is this? I have had, or even worse yet, asking AI,
Yeah.
what is whatever. As somebody who I use AI a lot of times to help me shape content and info.
Mhm.
And I have to be like, no, that's not what that means. Like here's what it means. Now help me put it into the shape. But yeah, so there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I do warn people about that.
And if the search engines in the AI are getting it wrong, chances are we probably will at some point if we're just doing the research our own at
Yeah.
this point, because there's so much more content available on human
Yeah.
design now.
Yeah. And so you started offering a course to certify people, like just within a few years of you learning, huh? And people, yeah, wow,
I certified over 350 people through that program.
Yeah, wow,
Yeah.
that's great. And so, what is that course called?
It's called SSCC, or Sacred Success Coaching Certification. Just, we love the SSCC abbreviation.
Okay, so that includes more than just human design, that includes coaching.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a coaching method and then an entire library of videos, study resources. I really went into different learning styles. So there's quizzes, there's Quizlet decks, there's like flashcards, there's a workbook that's very interactive. It has the like connect the terms and definitions, and it's got coloring things. And yeah, there's beautiful slide decks, there's textbooks that go with it. We went really all out in touching on all of the different learning styles. That was really important to me.
Yeah. So now, was that something you learned about in your nursing education about different, did that any of
A little bit, but really I found it through human design. I was homeschooled until I was 17, and so jumping into college, I wasn't testing well. I was learning things and I was absorbing the information. I felt like I was getting it, but I wasn't used to a standardized testing environment. And so studying and recall were topics I was specifically focusing on when I found human design. Was how do I use this to get better grades? So it's pretty much, I know that I'm smart. I know that I know this content. Why can't I recall the answer instantly in that moment? And so I dove into like the Head Center and the Ajna Center a little bit to determine information there. I also went into the variables as well, which has a lot of information about memory and recall.
Right.
And I learned that really our profiles as well tell us a lot of information about how we learn and how we master content. And so I really focused on just being a 6-2 profile. And that was an incredible method for me in like teaching myself how I learn. And I teach that now. It's so incredible. Yeah.
So I want to back you up because you use the term variable, and I just think that's something that a lot of people, well, I mean, everything in human design, people don't necessarily understand. But so variables are the 4 arrows that are on most charts. There are some charts you can get that don't have the arrows for variables, but most charts will have 4 arrows at the top that either face right or left, or some combination of those two. And I noticed that you have the top 2 for you are both right facing. So those are the ones that most, especially the far right top arrow, impacts how you learn. And when you have that arrow as a right facing arrow specifically, it really is a very different way of learning, right? So I feel like in a lot of cases, that's the biggest piece in there, is this whole, like, everything in schools are set up for that left facing arrow, which is the strategic, active kind of learning.
Yeah.
Whereas right facing arrows, it's I have it as well, the right facing mind, but how do you describe it?
Yeah, it's a very passive energy. And I see it as almost being a sponge instead of somebody who needs repetition. I've always been, if I'm really trying to understand something, if I'm able to focus on it once and piece it together and figure it out how it works, I'm able to understand it and recall it. And then to go a layer deeper, I have inner vision cognition. And if I can visualize it, if I would write my notes in color coded them, lots of different color, made them very pretty. And I still reference them today for certain things because I can visualize the notes and almost read certain things if I took enough time creating it. And so that was also like activating sacral energy as a manifesting generator. Writing notes, just typing them out wasn't as fun as drawing them out and making pretty diagrams. If I can make it visually appealing, yes, it took longer, but I had way better chances of remembering it and recalling it later. So yeah, it was so helpful learning how I learn.
Yeah. And then a deeper layer in our variables is our determination, which is how we take in information, right? And so you have this closed determination, which, you know, a lot of people treat as meaning just about diet, right? They talk about diet, but it's really how you take in information in general and nutrients and anything that's going to nourish your body. And so with that closed determination, that feels like that would have an aspect. I'm thinking you probably have contemplated how that plays into all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's themes of open and closed. And so it's very seasonal. I tend to learn in seasons. So there's seasons where I am obsessed with learning the gene keys and I'm reading a chapter a day. And then there's seasons where I don't touch the book for 6, 7 months and I'm just not interested in it. I'll do the same thing with, I'm super obsessed with profiles and then I'm really into the channels and then I'm focused on the centers. So my interest in what I'm consuming and looking for is it's seasonal. That's interesting to notice that like what I do like isn't always consistently the same. It does change season to season. And I really noticed it when I was really excited about nursing, it was easy to study nursing. And then all of a sudden it was like this switch flipped where I got super interested in human design. And that's all that I wanted to study. And it was almost like I was closed to learning about nursing. It felt like that my sacral energy just turned off. And it was very difficult to get myself to like force myself to be open to consuming content around nursing. And it would almost be like a bitter taste in my mouth when I'm sitting in a Zoom room learning about the digestive system or learning about these medications or taking a practice test. I got a lot of sores in my mouth showing up as well because closed taste is related to the mouth. So I would get a lot of like sores showing up. And I thought maybe the food I'm eating is too acidic or something, but it was stress. And it was my body saying, consuming this is burning you. Consuming this is like, it's eating you as much as you're consuming it. So yeah, it's very interesting to play with the closed taste. Mm-hmm.
So, that's interesting to contemplate the idea of the sores in the mouth. Because I'm big on that whole, like, what is my body trying to communicate through things? And yeah, sores in the mouth. I remember reading something about that disruption, but I don't remember it right now. But that's interesting to put it in the context of what you're learning. And that had to be hard, though, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Was it difficult to make the decision to quit?
It was very difficult. Oh yeah, it was not an easy decision. I had just gotten my degree. I was the speaker at our graduation. I was part of the student nursing organization. I was very involved in the nursing community. I ran a bunch of study groups. And so I'd really built this identity around Eden as a nurse. And people respect nurses. It's one of the most respected professions. It's a profession where everyone there is there to help. It's one of the most difficult bachelor's degrees to get. So there was a lot of ego and identity built around this career. And then I had just gotten the job and everyone was sending me fun little like gifts for here's a fun little water bottle that says Eden RN. And, they were congratulating me for this big thing that I had done. And the whole time there was this emotional wave being ridden in the background of, do I really want this? Is this actually what I want? And with the 3740 channel defining my emotional emotional center, that conversation is really, can I have what I want? Is it selfish around what I want? And how is me getting what I want going to hurt or impact other people? Like, what's the conflict going to be? What's the emotional landscape going to be if I do this? And so it's very focused on the tribe and who is going to be involved. How is my nurse manager going to feel if I say, hi, I'm a brand new nurse that you just hired and I'm quitting not just this job, but the entire field? How are my nursing school peers going to look at me? How is my husband going to look at me? He had supported me through nursing school so that I could get that job, and he had been in the military to do that. And so there was a lot of different roles where I pretty much had to say, and it was a great deconditioning moment of, okay, everything outside of me says the smart, realistic thing to do would be to keep this job, would be to push through, maybe take a week off if you need a little bit of a break, but somehow figure a way to keep this stable, secure job. Like, don't quit your day job is the
Right.
realistic thing to do. And I had to come up and say, everything in my energy is saying that I can't. my sacral energy is completely frustrated. Like going to the building, I'm crying on my way to work because I'm so mad I don't want to be there. I'm like, that's misalignment. Everything in me is saying I can't do this. And so I had to ride that emotional wave of, well, what if my husband leaves me because he thinks that I'm going through a manic episode? He thinks that I'm just insane or something like that for quitting my job this suddenly. What if people online think I'm crazy? What if my business just, it's really good right now, but what if it crashes in a couple of months and I don't have enough nursing experience to actually get another job really easily? And so there was a lot of what if, what if, what if. And if I sat through that and as I filtered through it, everything inside of me said, that's still the right way. All the what ifs, that's
Let,
still the right way.
let me ask you this, because the way you told the story, you said you knew you couldn't go to work the next day. And so that sounds like a very in the moment decision. But was it a decision that was in the moment, or did you feel you actually had emotional clarity in making it?
I had emotional clarity. With my triple split, how I feel it works is there's typically a sacral response to something that starts and initiates this emotional wave. So it's like, ooh, that would be really exciting. Wait, can I actually do that? And then I ride the emotional wave. And then there's this splenic intuition ping that comes in that says, this is the action. Now we get to move. So it's almost like a three-part decision. I'd kind of been feeling the I don't want to be a nurse forever feelings for a while. I'd even had a conversation with one of my professors in nursing school at one point. I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And pretty much the answer was, it's just nursing school. Like, you're going to be a great nurse. You're one of the top students. You're great with patients. You're going to be just fine once you get out into the world. And maybe you'll be a nurse educator or something. But they were saying,
So
no.
you'd had the wave going for a while.
Yeah, they've been going for a while.
Okay, I want to back up a little bit because I really want to have this conversation about the triple split as well. And this feels like a really good time. So I want to stop by first explaining to listeners who might be newer to this and might not understand what a triple split is, or split in general. So, and if you can't see Eden's chart right now. So, but if you've seen a human design chart, and if you haven't seen one, you can go to my website, kathybashanko.com, and you can run yours. If you don't have it, this would be a great time to pause and go get it and look at yours. There's 9 centers. Those are the crazy shapes that Eden talked about at the beginning. And when they are defined, meaning they have consistent access to energy, they are colored in. Otherwise, they're left open. And we all have all of the chart. We just have inconsistent access in those other places. So the places where both Eden and I have consistent access are in 3 different groupings. Now, they're not the exact same groupings. So I'm going to tell you, Eden has a group of 3 centers that all speak to each other. And the way you know if they're a grouping is if you can draw a line from one center to the other without hitting any white, right? So her ajna, the second center, connects to her throat, and then that connects down to her sacral. So that's one grouping. Then she has her will center, sometimes called the heart center, that connects to the emotional center. So that's the other where her emotional wave is. And then she has her splenic awareness center that connects to the root pulse center, which is a pressure center. So those 3 sections don't speak to each other in a consistent way. So mine is a little bit different because I don't have a defined sacral. Mine is my head and ajna are open. So I have my throat connected to my identity center through the 1-8. And then I have my will center connected to my spleen through the 2644. And then I have my emotional solar plexus and my root center connected through the 3955. So it's really helpful when you have this sort of a mechanic to understand exactly the kind of thing that Eden just unpacked for us when she said how it typically works for you. Now, I'm curious about, first of all, does that feel aligned what I said? Is there anything you want to add to that? Okay.
I see it as like sidebar conversations. If we have 9 people at a boardroom meeting, me as a triple split, there's 3 sidebar conversations going on. And so at any point, I can kind of as the whole conversation, so to speak, me, myself, I can almost tune into and listen into the emotional conversation and see what's going on there. I can listen into the splenic conversation and see, like, is there pressure? What's happening over here? And then I love to trace the channels to see really specifically, like, what is the conversation that's happening between those energy centers, because there's patterns. There's
Yeah.
patterns everywhere.
Yeah. And I could probably have a whole conversation with you just about life as a triple split, because that, in so many circles is not talked about enough. Like, there is this tendency to say that strategy and authority is enough. But without understanding how my triple split works, I think I would really still be stuck in this place of blaming my husband for everything, or my daughter too, because both of them bridge my splits. So when I'm alone and I don't need to leave my house, my husband's a manifesting generator, I'm a projector. So when it was just him, my daughter's living at home again for right now. But when it was just my husband and I, and for a little while he was retired as well, and I was just starting to build my business and that sort of thing. So we were both home together a lot. And I just always had this dialogue in my head about how controlling he was, how controlling, how smothering. And he's like the nicest guy, right? But it's because he bridges all my splits, and my energy is meant to connect in all these different ways. Like, and then it would be amazing. I would go out and he'd be like, wow, you were gone a long time. And I was like, yeah, I was, wasn't I? I just like really enjoyed walking around Target for like an hour and a half. Right? Well, that 39.55 does like to shop, but it wasn't even about that. It was just sometimes, walking around and just feeling the way I process things and aura with different people. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit, though, about your particular chart, the way that you have that 3420, which is, for those who aren't familiar, that's the only pure manifesting generator channel. That's the only way that the sacral energy gets directly to the throat without having to go through another center. And so it's this really fast energy. And when I was first learning about human design and even first certifying, it was very much taught that manifesting generators have this really quick, or so fast that sometimes it comes out as a word and before they even feel that feeling of the sacral response. So here I am trying to tell my husband, uninvited, right? I have not been invited to guide him in human design, but I'm telling him anyway, because that's what we do, especially in the beginning, right? So I'm trying to explain to him about this, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, and whatever. He wasn't really interested enough to explore this on his own, because that's, again, I was not to guide. So I remember at one point, as he started to see how much impact I was having on other people, right? And how much people were saying these things are like, oh, this has changed my life. And he's like, all right, maybe I'll pay attention. So he watches this video I have on YouTube that tells you how to get in touch with your sacral, and he's listening to it. And it's all these simple questions, and it's me just asking these questions so that you can feel the response. And he's like, why do I want to know that? Every time I'd ask a question, he's answering with another question. And I finally realized it's because he has the same thing you do. And I'm wondering if this comes out this way for you. The 1762, the sacral doesn't have time to say yes before the question drops in.
Yeah.
Right? So that 1762 says, well, why do I want to do that?
Yeah.
Right?
My husband will ask, he calls me every day at 4:27 p.m., almost on the dot, unless I text him and say I have a call or something, and we chat for a little bit. And then he asks, what do you want for dinner? And usually the question, it's immediately organizing information. It's like, okay, well, what do we have in the pantry? What did we put on the grocery list? Like, what did we plan for our dinners for this week? What have we already eaten? It's already in this inquisitive, okay, what are we even looking at? Where are we starting? Because that sacral needs something to respond to. And so if it's not a yes, no question, then that sacral can't say, yes, I want this for dinner, or no. And so that 1762 comes in and says, okay, here's a whole bunch of questions.
But his response to a yes, no question is usually a question. It's kind of his way of saying, I don't have enough information to compute that answer, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, so I could say, do you want tacos for dinner? And he would respond with, well, what kind of tacos? Like he can't, you know what I mean? Like there's always a qualifier. Like, well, what are we going to have tomorrow? Will there
Yeah.
be leftovers for me to take for lunch then? You know, and there's always a question. Like it's never just a straight up yes, no. And it's just because he's always, and so I just wondered if that.
Yeah. It's like a yes if. Yes, I want tacos, but not if we don't have cilantro. Not if it's going to mean that we don't have leftovers and
Right.
I'm going to have to figure out something different for lunch tomorrow. That's not worth the tacos today.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So been an interesting thing. And I think that that's one of the things I've noticed with a lot of the information out there now with people who are there's people who are so excited about human design and talking about it justifiably so, but I think it's important for people to remember that over like it's so complicated that in a way we need to almost dumb it down, simplify it for people, right? But then at the same time, the simplifying it can almost make it seem too formulaic. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It
So
gets boxy.
yeah.
Mhm.
So okay, let's go back to when you first found your human design. You talked about how the Open Identity Center really spoke to you.
Mhm.
And I'm noticing, you know, I love to just pick on things that jump out at me. I noticed that both of your Mercury gates are the two gates on your identity center. So, um, you know, and for those who don't know, Mercury is the planet that kind of says what we're here to communicate about, right? So, not only are undefined centers where we are, you know, gaining wisdom, sharing from a place of amplified experience, that sort of thing, but it's what you're here to talk about. And how does that play out in your life for you?
It's It's definitely present, especially with human design being one of the things that I've been so passionate about for a long time as a manifesting generator, to be still excited about sharing this content and sharing the system 7 years later. Many gens go in lots of different phases, but with those particular gates, 46 is the gate of embodiment.
Right, but
And
I
we
said
have,
I'm going to back up. I
yeah,
just realized I said that both of them are. The other one I'm have it really little. Your other Mercury gate is 26 on your will center. So I said
yeah,
it's not they're not both.
Saturn is,
One of them is. So it's one that's one of your Saturn gates. Okay, so that's a little bit different, but it's still a very
oh,
strong.
yeah.
But go ahead and speak to the 46.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my Saturn return next year in 25. That'll be a
Oh,
fun
you're
time.
already in it if your Saturn return is next year, because the Saturn return starts several years before and continues for a few years after. I mean, it's
Yeah.
usually at least 5 years, but the Saturn one is so big that you really feel it for several years before and after.
Yeah.
You're going on the
Yeah.
roof, girl. We'll talk about that
Creeping
next.
up. Yes, we'll talk about that next. But
Okay.
yes, 46 is very much around embodiment. And so, how I've understood the conscious versus unconscious Mercury gates is the conscious one is what you're really here to, like the things that you actually say, but the unconscious energy is the true message that's really coming through. And so, I sell sales energy. I sell desire. 46 being in an undefined center was really curious for me, because that's a theme of, who am I? What am I doing? That's still a question that I ask today. And I've been studying myself through my human design chart for over 7 years now. And so I'm really good at understanding identity, and that undefined center gives me the ability to really see into how people express identity in the full range of what it is. And so I talk about, you get to have what you want. You get to embrace your natural energy. It's an aligned to frequency in the 26.2. I talk about, I've talked a lot about like sales. I've talked about money. I've run business programs. There is like some 26 energy in the more marketing language. But what I teach is embodying your strategy and authority. I'm not going to tell you, because you're a projector, you can't do human design readings, or something like that. I'm not going to give you structures. I'm going to ask you the questions to say, okay, at this point in your business, where do you want to go next? And so it's really like I can talk about sales and marketing, and those things typically do and perform really well for me. And the results are really beautiful as well, because I'm not teaching how to get hooks. I'm saying, okay, based on the gates in your throat center, this is how you're going to speak most often. Do you have channels for self-expression so that you can clear your mind? It's not about content creation, it's about energetic maintenance and managing your energy. I use my business as a portal for my energy with that 1762, especially motorized with the sacral. I get headaches with all of the information that's in my head. When I write it down, when I created the certification, it was like getting it out of my mind, and it gave me this like mental relief. And so, yes, it's amazing that it's made money and it's helped a whole bunch of people. And it's a relief that I have this business where I have an outlet for my energy to just flow into, and I can process how I need to process, and I get to feel good the whole time. So, yeah, that's how I've played with those, and it turned into a tangent, but that's my answer.
Well, it's interesting because I have the same unconscious Mercury as you, the gate 46, all love of the body, the embodiment thing, but I have it on the on my defined G center. So, which is the center for identity, center for love and direction.
Hey, just popping in for a quick sec. I know we're deep in conversation, but if you're feeling called to dive deeper into your human design experiment, I'm here to guide you. Whether it's a personalized reading or one-on-one mentorship, let's explore the next steps towards radical self-trust together. Visit kathybashanko.com to learn more. All right, back to the conversation. There's so much more to explore.
I was listening to something last night from Richard Beaumont, where he was talking about how we find our direction in life, and he was really talking about it through the gates of the identity center. And it just really reminded me that you were saying even 7 years in, unpacking all these layers. I'm over 8 years since I first found human design, and it I didn't have the moment where the things came together to tell me to get on it, but I had my own experience of. I feel like it's like the emotion, like we emotionals have to wait a little while even in the beginning to know, okay, I have clarity now, I do want to dive into this. And for me it was a good probably 2.5 years, right, of just like keeping it in the back of my mind. And one of the things that I still have to come up with and say, oh, wait, don't worry about where you're going. The invitations are going to lead you there, right?
Yep.
And so I will still get caught sometimes in the whole thing of like, what direction do I want to head? Where do I want to go next, right? And so with that undefined identity center, I would imagine that that feeling could be even more overwhelming, right? But
Yeah.
your response, your sacral response is going to take you where you are meant to go, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's fun. I play with the undefined centers. I describe the energy as flexible. So I say fixed and flexible. And that identity is flexible. And so I'm open to being anybody. And it's going to be really interesting to see who I end up being, like what version of me is called out by the people that I surround myself with. So I never know who exactly I'm going to show up as, but I have cultivated a sense of self trust in knowing that I'm going to know who I need to be. Like I'll be in the environment, and whoever needs to be expressed through me is going to be expressed through me. I'll be the perfect version of myself for whatever room I'm in at that time. But since I'm not in that room, I don't have the energetics to respond to, and I'm not going to be able to figure it out now. And so I can be in this room and be whoever I need to be here, because these are the energetics that I actually have access to and I can respond to. So that's been how I've played with it. Mm.
So do you ever regret quitting nursing?
No,
No.
no. Sometimes the regret of even going to nursing school comes in. I'm like, why did I spend all that time and money on that degree? But I still use a lot of the wisdom that I learned in nursing school, like patient education and like that foundation of anatomy and physiology, the nervous system. So yeah, I don't regret it.
Well, this feels like a good time to talk about that whole 6-line thing too, because the 6-line profile has 3 phases to it. And we said we are going to talk about you going on the roof. And I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but I am also a 6-2. And for those who don't know, the 6-line is talked about as having 3 phases. And even if you don't have a 6-line profile, you might have 6-line energy in your chart somewhere. And there's certain 6-line elements to different things. So 6-line has this first component that is this experimental phase, this kind of learning through experience, bumping into things and seeing what breaks and what doesn't, and really learning a lot through things people might term as a mistake. But because we're not actually third lines that have this resiliency that's built in to keep learning that way over and over, it gets really exhausting. And we start to beat ourselves up sometimes about those choices, like maybe like, why did I spend all that money on school? Why did I waste the time? I could have been building a business or whatever those things, the stories our mind tells us about why did we do the things we did, right? And then the Saturn return comes in, which we were starting to touch on. And Saturn says, here's the lessons you really need to focus on. And we really get this big, I'm not doing it right kind of feeling in those lessons, right? Because there's something we need to look at there, which is usually tied up in your Saturn gates, which yours is 25, the 25 and the 17. So the 25 is the other one that I saw on your identity center, which is the love of spirit, right? Love, the connection to everything. And then the 17, that one is, I'm blanking on the name of it. Opinions, yes. Okay, so having the opinions, but that's that logical energy that's connected that we were talking about when I was sharing the experience of my husband and you sharing the channel. And obviously, you know this, I'm telling this for the listeners and that. But so then you go on the roof with this idea of like, all right, well, tell me before I say more, just tell me your understanding of what it's going to mean to go on the roof.
Yeah. So, from somebody who is inching their way up to the roof, but not quite there yet, I've seen it described as a period of time where you feel a little bit distant and almost cut off from a lot of the things that you've been or that you were experiencing. And there just tends to be a lot of big identity shifts and growth and reflection. And so it's almost like you go through a lot of trial and error in those first 30 years. You gain a full lifetime's worth of experience. And then you go back through and you contemplate it and you kind of take notes and you gather all of the wisdom and it almost assimilates into a true role model energy. So you have the experience and you have the optimism and you have the vision of what's not just what has already been created, but what could possibly be created in the future. And so, yeah, you really gather all of that life experience, assimilate it, and then turn it into a bridge into something bigger that you will teach people and share people and be a role model of this futuristic vision that you have in your role model phase of life around that 50-year mark.
Yeah. And I think that's a good explanation. I tend to say it as the first phase is doing all the things and trying all the things, the experiments. And it's not like you all of a sudden stop being a person who experiments. There's all 3 phases exist in everybody's life to some degree. So, and every time you do something new, there's going to be that trial and error phase to it or whatever. But life in general, the sense of who you are, it's really about integrating all of that stuff in a way that, they call it on the roof because Ra uses the analogy of a house to describe the 6 lines in the hexagram. But I always liken it to, and you're going to be way too young to know what this is, but other people will know maybe you've heard of the show. There was a show called Third Rock from the Sun. And it was John Lithgow, I think, was the main actor who was in it. It was a sitcom that was about these people who came from another planet and were living as humans. And they would sit on the roof at the end of every episode and look at whatever planet it was they were from, and they would reflect on all of the stuff that just had happened in the craziness of living on Earth in that day. And I feel like it's really like that analogy of like they're sitting there and they're talking and they're just reflect. So you're kind of just taking it all in and putting the pieces together to make it make sense, right? And so for me, there was a lot of that beginning phase that was okay. I mean, because I got married right around the time of going on the roof for my second time. I got married once when I was 19, divorced by 22, started a whole career in retail fashion, was a district manager, moved like 11 times in 10 years, including three different states. I mean, it was just like craziness, right? Um, and then when I had this experience of being on the roof, it was kind of like, all right, let me figure out what I want to do with all this. Now I'm going to settle down. Like, so there's a certain like decompressing period, right? And figuring out what's next. But a lot of it is really this integrating and watching then other people and saying, you know, those mistakes that I thought I made actually really prepared me to have a better understanding of this or no, this is not what I want to do. Or, you know, you start to learn how to integrate those lessons in a way that's more meaningful. And then you come off the roof and that's its whole other, you know, experience. And I think each phase has its own phases within it, right? There's a certain amount of, you know, figuring out what it means to be on the roof, figuring out what it means to be off the roof. So I don't know. That was probably clear as mud, but it's a new
It was
phase.
very clear.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to really spend this time in the next year or two, and which you probably already have, really contemplating the energy of your Saturn gates, because that's a big lesson. Or lesson sounds too harsh, but that's what Saturn is, right? Saturn's all about the harsh. So, you know, what are the lessons? And yours are both third lines, aren't they?
Yes.
So that's interesting. You're going out of your third line phase with this big, big third line energy of lessons, right?
And my Saturn return starts almost the day that Saturn enters Aries. So it's about as long as it can possibly be. Like, great. Thank you. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Well, you'll feel it going up to that point just as much as you will. And then, you know, I mean, I know astrologically they talk about it being, you know, when Saturn is in Aries, but it's really, you know, if you think about it, if people who are not very versed in human design are really well versed in astrology, the gate is very similar to like looking at the degree of a sign, right? Because it's very specific within a sign. So the gate and the line that is exact is 25.3 for your Saturn return, but you're going to feel it for those degrees around it too, right? So you're going to feel it when it's anywhere near that. It's just most intense at that point. So, and everything's always happening for us, right?
Yes. I mean, I'm also in my experience, one of few 6-2 profiles who's had a full 7 years of deconditioning work with the system before I even start that Saturn return. So I feel like I have a lot of tools and resources and support. I have so many 6-2 friends that are already on the roof just waiting or like watching.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I was already off the roof when I found it. So I always wonder what it would have been like if, you know, because I can remember being around my Saturn return and all these energies of pulls to do things that I pushed down, you know, pushed away. And if I had been actually exploring them and doing that work back then, you know, and I'm not saying a what if as in I did something wrong. I'm just saying I'm curious sometimes what that would be like for somebody who actually started that young and didn't say, well, we don't have time to deal with that. You know, we're working to work in the 3D world and have a career and trying to get pregnant and all the things I was trying to do around that time, you know? So, but when I came off the roof, I didn't know anything about human design for a couple of years yet. And at that point, it made a lot of things make sense. And I was like, oh, yeah. So I actually, it's funny because I had a really pretty gnarly ankle injury that resulted in me trying not to have surgery for a long time, for months and months, then having surgery, and then trying to work retail on my feet again after having. So I spent like I think my whole Chiron return, I was in an orthopedic boot. So I always say I fell off the roof, rolled down the hill, I landed in a ditch. And then I finally stood up, brushed myself off, started to move along. And then Saturn came in for my second Saturn return, right? Not long after that. And was like, are you really paying attention? But yeah, then but everything's happening for us. And I've told that story so many times, but you know, it's still a good
It's
story.
a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So what else do you think that would be important for people to know about your journey and like something really insightful that you feel like you learned about yourself through human design?
Let's see. Recently, I've been really interested in the connections between neurodivergency and human design because we're seeing so many people self-diagnose, get diagnosed, and we're just seeing a rise of autism, ADHD, neurodivergency. And I have not ever been diagnosed with ADHD or autism, but I meet a lot of the criteria for certain things. I even have like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is very associated with having autism and being on the spectrum. And there's a whole bunch of things, but I've never really considered it a problem because of my human design. And so, as this conversation around maybe I have ADHD has been coming up, I've been really curious. And I did a fun series of interviews, just kind of exploring this conversation on my podcast to just talk about, is it human design or is it ADHD? Because a lot of the symptoms that people experience and label as ADHD, or even things kind of on that autism spectrum, these neurodivergent experiences, can be mapped in your human design. And so I am, for example, somebody who can hyper focus, get really into something, completely tune out of the world. Like there's been days where I don't get up from my desk. My husband gets home and I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't even refilled my water bottle today, let alone eaten. Like I was just so focused on the thing. And then there's other times where my energy is just not into it. That's a sacral response. Me as a manifesting generator, I will have that really intense hyper focus. And it's not executive dysfunctioning. I'm not struggling with anything or you're not able to get myself to do something. That thing isn't aligned for me. And so I've been just really, really loving the connections between understanding how our mind works, understanding these behavior patterns that we may experience around productivity, focus, being staying on track, healthy habits, environment, and things like that, and your human design, because it's a map to who you are and how your brain works. And unmasking ADHD and autism is a process of letting go of. It's essentially deconditioning. They say, hey, you've been conditioned to be this way and to show up in a neurotypical world, and you're realizing that you're different. And so I would love to see more people who identify or who are curious about their ADHD symptoms explore their human design to see if this is actually a map of those symptoms that they're experiencing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important conversation. I think it's also important to make sure no one misunderstands, because I understand what you're saying, but there are some people who try to teach ADHD markers in the chart, and I'm pretty
No.
sure that you're not saying that. You're saying that and we're not saying that ADHD doesn't exist and that you shouldn't get treatment for it, but that there are certain things that as society has said, oh, this means you're not normal.
Yeah.
And what human design says is, let's get rid of normal, right?
Yes.
Let's
Normal doesn't exist.
let's each be the once in a lifetime cosmic event we came here to be, as Karen Parker likes to say. And I love that saying, right? Like really be who you specifically have come here to be. And that's something I'm really focusing into with. I talk a lot about radical self-trust. And there's so much idea. This would feel like it would come up a lot with that 3740 that you have, that tribal agreements kind of thing. This idea that society needs us all to conform and be a certain way. But especially now with like, I was just gotten a conversation with some women. We are talking about college and stuff. And I said, until college stops putting people into tracks, right? And trying to teach people like how to track for a certain thing. And, or not even just the college, they started in grade school now, right? In elementary school.
Yeah.
Instead saying, okay, let's put you into these big, broad things that allow you to say, ooh, this is exciting, this is exciting, and this is exciting. Oh, let's turn here, right? This is now and following your excitement, right? So, because that's the new age of individualism, the 2027 mutation that human design talks about. That's a whole nother thing for those who don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Don't Google it. You'll be sorry. So
there's too much pessimistic energy about that.
There's a lot, right? And I think it's going to be a really exciting time, and I am excited to be a part of helping people understand that the world can't be its high frequency, wonderful thing it's supposed to be unless we are each being our high frequency being that we're meant to be. So that 3740, that tribal agreement channel, has a lot of responsibility to kind of mutate as well, even though it's technically not changing in the chart the way some of the other things are. The energy of it, I feel like, is shifting. And I'm wondering, does that resonate with you?
Yeah. It's very much, I mean, because the 1949 is part of the mutation. So the other tribal wave, really, I mean, we have the 59 to 6, but the other tribal wave is really mutating, and the emotional center is going to no longer be a motor center. It's just going to be an awareness center. And I think this is a huge deal because right now we are emotionally reactive as a collective. And I think that's one of like collectively that's the biggest problem that we have is that we are emotionally reactive. We would not have wars. We would not have so much conflict on a daily basis if we were not as emotionally reactive. And it used to save our lives. At one point, it was necessary. We don't need survival level emotions over emails, over comments, over social media posts, over what we're getting at the grocery store. It's not necessary anymore. And so I see that we will be experiencing emotional awareness, and we're going to see this next generation come in after 2027 very emotionally aware, but not emotionally reactive. And that does change the tribal dynamic where it's no longer, what do I want? And how is that going to conflict and harm other people? Because it's always like the biggest reason for me not leaving my nursing job sooner was I didn't want to leave the floor without a nurse because they had just hired me. I felt my husband was going to like the tribe, like that was an agreement that we had made. He was going to support me through nursing school. I was going to get the nursing job, dual income. It was going to be great. We had a plan together. We had an agreement, and I broke that. Like we shifted, and it was exactly what it needed to be. But I really feel like I always say, what's aligned for me is aligned for everyone that's involved. And when we're choosing alignment, like we're advocating for our alignment. Everything inside of us is advocating for our alignment, whether that's your emotional authority or your root center or whatever. Everything is advocating for you to be in alignment, because when you're in alignment, you are of the most service to the people around you. So I see the 4037 really transforming, because it's no longer going to be, is it safe for me to want what I want? And that's really been the story of the 3740 is it safe for me to want what I want? Is my family going to disown me if I am truly myself? And that's not going to be as big of an issue because there's not going to be that emotional reactivity. It's going to be, hey, this is who I am. Awesome. Amazing. You do you. Move on. Next topic. Yeah.
And it's exciting, right? I think it's really exciting.
Yes.
I actually have been working with clients on the idea of getting rid of rules about, what's appropriate, right? Like you get to decide what's appropriate as far as like what you're going to wear, right? How you're going to show up. Like, it's never not okay to be you, as long as you're not using yourself as a weapon against other people, right? And that is, again, that whole reactivity thing. If what you're doing is, if you're intentionally, for example, like I've been working with clients on how, like, a more individual approach to your outward expression, your dress, your style. Now, if you're doing that to shock and offend people because you want to get back, and that's like a reactive kind of thing, yeah, there might be a reason to have rule. People are like, well, there's a reason there's rules. Well, are there really? Is there really a reason? Is there a reason you have to dress a certain way to do something? What if we all just really show up as ourselves and then people know who we are? Right. And then we could just respond that way. But when we're doing things, like this idea that, well, that's not really age appropriate. That's my favorite one. Or like, when you're going to an event and people say, well, what am I supposed to wear? Well,
what's the dress code?
What do you want to wear? I actually, when we were at the Human Design Conference together, at the Saturday night after I'd had my presentation and I did the whole bit about dancing, right?
Yes.
A couple people were like, let's go dancing. And so I really wanted to wear, I had these new shoes that have like their little flat, very comfortable slingbacks with little rhinestones on them. But they're just a shoe. They're not necessarily like a formal shoe. They're flat, whatever. And I had them on and I wanted to wear the sparkly necklace. And and I knew one person said, well, I'm not going to change because we were going out early. And I was like, oh, am I going to be overdressed? And then I was like, you know what? What does that even mean? Like, even that for me for a second, right? And I was like, this is what I want to wear. I'm going to wear it. And she can wear whatever she wants and we can have fun together. And that's like just such a new, like, do you remember getting ready when, I don't know if this was still a thing when you were young, but I remember, you still are young, but I remember in my 20s when I'd be getting ready to go out to the clubs with my friends or whatever. And I'd be like, are you going to wear a dress? I don't know if I want to wear a dress unless you're going to wear a dress. Am I going are you going to wear jeans? There's this whole thing of like,
I'll wear heels if you wear heels.
right? Right. That whole,
yes.
And I mean, I get there's some fun in that, but to a certain extent, like, no, you be you and really owning what you want to do. So, but anyway, so we've been chatting about all kinds of different things. That's a triple split kind of conversation, right?
Yeah, all the tangents.
So right now, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you or to see how they can work with you?
Come hang out with me on Instagram. I am Eden Carpenter. That's my Instagram handle. That is where I'm hanging out most consistently. And you can find chart information. You can get all of the different programs that I have at whatever time you're listening to this, because I do some live programs, but who knows when you're listening to this episode and tuning in. There's also just some amazing evergreen offers that I've created as well that you can browse. But yeah, come hang out with me on Instagram. It's a fun place to be.
Yeah. And so right now, your current offer, though, I think you were doing something about money, right? Or at least that's what you were talking about at the conference, right?
Yes. So I was speaking about money at the conference, and I have a great ebook that would be a great place to start. It's 40-ish pages. I think it's like $4 on my website or something super amazing like that, called the Financial Freedom Framework. And then I created a program around money a couple of years ago, but it was taught live. It was uploaded to YouTube, but then downloaded and uploaded to the website. And it's not the high quality, super precise content. And I've learned new skills since then. And so I'm actually redoing Patterns of Prosperity, and it will be coming out probably sometime in November of 2024. Awesome. And yeah, I'm really excited for it.
That's great. Okay, well, I really want to thank you for joining me today. I've enjoyed this. Look at the crystals are from my window now, right across my neck, right? But I wanted to thank you very much for doing this. I right away knew when I heard you speak, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to her. And everybody needs to hear all this great wisdom. And I think the biggest takeaway, just kind of going back in from it, that I took from hearing you speak was how brave you were to take this really sensible career and say, this isn't working. Everything in my body says no. And I'm not going to do it. And then the best part was you didn't allow yourself to then listen to all the people who probably said, what the heck? Are you crazy? And you did something really amazing right afterwards. And so, I just celebrate and kudos to you for that courage. And I hope that it inspires someone else to not blindly just throw something out the window. I'm not telling you to do that. But to when your heart says, this is not where my energy needs to keep going, even if other people are going to think you're crazy, do the damn thing, right? Do it. Okay. So peace out, everybody.
Peace.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of Real Human Design Stories. I hope these stories help you see how human design can reframe not only your own story, but also the stories you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to tell a more empowered story about who you came here to be, I invite you to explore ways to work with me directly at kathybashanko.com. Supporting this podcast is easy. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star rating, like, comment, and share with your friends. This helps the podcast grow the most. You can also become a contributing sponsor for as little as 99 cents a month. Details are available at realhumandesignstories.com. Thanks again for being here. Real Human Design Stories is created and hosted by me, Kathy Bashanko, and produced by Number 3 Productions. Peace out, everybody.